The groove knows. I work the east trench when the light is still soft enough to flatter what you want to keep. The shale takes a brush the way a cat tolerates fingers, not welcoming it, not fighting either. You learn to make circles with your wrist instead of strokes. You blow the dust out of your own eyelashes and taste what the hillside has kept from weather. The bed here blooms in centimeters because the foreman wants it that way. A rib, then a swirl of vertebra, then a concretion that turns egg smooth against your palm, and inside that, sometimes, a surprise that buys you the rest of the week. The surprise this morning is not bone, it is metal, not a shiny kind, knurled, dull, a body scarred the way aluminum gets when it lives in trucks. I know the shape without naming it. I reach for my own torch because we do that at a sight. We compare, we make dumb jokes about twins. The model is the same as the one that sleeps in my belt holster and warms to my hand by the second minute. Even the nick at the head where it once kissed an outcrop when I slipped. The serial on my light ends in a sequence I know by touch. Through the loop, the tiny raised characters on the metal locked in stone echo that same tale as if the rock had been reading my pockets while I slept. I fit the beam to the cavity without meaning to. It nests with a small click, stone answering stone, like a chest drawer shutting itself for you. I thumb the rubber button and the rock answers not by being lit, which is all you ask of a lamp, but by returning light along a line I don't own. A pale tunnel angles down past the bed, past my boots. A vein inside the mudstone that shouldn't take a beam because light is not supposed to behave like water. Wind drops. Flies burn a brief halo near the tarp edge and take their hunger elsewhere. The trench goes quiet the way rooms go right before someone says a hard thing. "Hold still," someone says behind me, voice close as breath. It could be the air moving through the gap between sheet and rebar. It could be the up-valley drafts breaking around the lip. It could be what people call hearing yourself think, when what they mean is hearing themselves not. I don't turn, because movement is how things change, and I have a prickly sense that changing anything is dangerous right now. The consolidant we sprayed last evening has gone tacky. The mud begins to set around what ought to be bone, and has surprised me by being a flashlight. I try to withdraw my hand because that's what the training says. Stop, document, call for help. Regard your impulse like a porch dog regards a skunk, curious, wary, embarrassed for wanting. The stone keeps my fingers poised, the way a fossil keeps whatever the animal did in the last half-minute it owned breath, tender as wet clay, firm as a promise. I could break my own fingers to leave. I could break the rock and ruin a story older than all of us. I do not break anything. I stay. Through the beam, I watch the graphite line of battery segments shrink, not in the way my lamp has always shrunk, which is honest and slow and forgivable, but backward, as if time has found my palm and decided to count in a different direction. The digits write themselves wrong, and then right, and then wrong again. Behind the numbers, the mudstone wavers, not melting. Melting would mean heat, and I would honor heat with sweat. But loosening the way a word loses its sense if you let your mouth shape it too long. Plaster, I call, meaning it to be louder. But the trench swallows it, and the tarps above make thin shapes out of sound. The plaster team is late because the truck we use for water coughed on the road out and rolled to a stop at the bottom of Saxton Ridge, and the driver sent a message through to say a belt has snapped and he is waiting on a tow, and cussing under his breath because this is a job with too many belts and not enough money to replace them before they confess themselves. I know the rule. Do not touch a modern object with the same body that touches the bone you re-pulling. Gloves, documentation, compartmentalization. The field lab has a small poster that says this on the back of the door in calm letters, and whenever the wind takes that door, it slaps the poster and the paper flaps like it does not believe itself either. I have broken worse rules and kept my job. The kind you break when no one is looking but you and the hillside. The kind that says, don't get attached to one rib, like it belongs to you. The kind that says, don't let a season up here be the way your body decides what to want. The rock warms my palm, not hot like a stove, a living heat, the kind that moves toward you minute by minute until the difference between you and the thing becomes smaller than either of you want to admit. My other hand, the one I think of as clean because it isn't tea in the stone, goes dumb from waiting. The breeze lifts the tarp and lays it back, a slow flap. The smile I put on at breakfast for the crew because we had leftover coffee. And someone found a jar of peanut butter that hadn't learned air, yet falls off my face without asking permission. The beam keeps going into the tunnel it has found, and the tunnel goes where my head will not follow and my feet can't. The trench's little noises return one by one, offended that I forgot to notice them. A fly bumps my ear, that sharp sting you get from wings that insist. A zipper on a jacket somewhere to my left coughs and then accepts the pull. A brush bristles against sandstone with a whisper, like a comb through hair. An inventory scanner down in camp beeps in 3 short notes and then a long, the sound we make when we want the world to count for us. I want someone to shout my name. I want silence to name me instead. I want both and neither. When the battery line dies, it writes itself into a shape like the ridge beyond the river, knuckled and notched, then goes to blank, as if it decided to rest rather than run out. The rock holds my hand a minute longer, like a friend who knows you need an extra second after a hug to accept that air one, to kill you when it returns. Then it lets me go with the softest reluctance I have ever felt from anything that isn't a person. I lie on my side on the damp mat I bring so my hip doesn't to remember this trench as the only place it ever knew. I say into the dirt, okay, not to anyone in particular. The dirt takes the word the way it takes rain, with patience and no opinion. When I sit up, the flashlight lodged in stone is gone. The cavity holds nothing, not even the little dull glint you get when metal pretends to be rock and fails. There is no scrap of lens, no torn O-ring, no dumb roll of rubber borrowed by lizards that like chewing more than the nourishment. The mudstone around the vacancy has another shape now, less stony, a texture I know from my own palm. The print of a thumb, the whirl, the nick on the index I carry from a winter when I dropped a blade and grabbed a mistake you make once and keep as a signature. I look down at my torch. It sits in its holster, weight as expected, warmth as expected. The serial tale is the one I know, brailed by familiarity under my thumb. I press the button. The beam stutters and holds, as if it hit a seam in the air and pushed through it. When it steadies, it makes the trench look like a hotel hallway, flat and harmless and longer than you can afford to walk without admitting you re-lost. I turn it off. The afterimage floats, then fades. I have the idiotic thought that if I press the beam against my own palm, it will write something there that explains me to myself. So I press the beam against my palm, and it does nothing but make veins stand up blue like every other day under the sun. By the time the plaster crew comes, I have covered the spot with a square of shade cloth weighed at 2 corners with sandstone, and at the other 2 with the small steel stakes we pretend to be gentle with, and are not. When I peel it back for them, there's only bed and a small, mean pocket where anything might have been. I tell them what I saw, and I tell it in a tone I have learned for donors and for men who need everything to make sense before the hour turns. Even amiable, like I'm embarrassed to have wanted. They listen with good faces, and they mix plaster with the hose water from the blue barrel, and the hose bangs twice in the wall of its own coil. A hollow knock like your neighbor has forgotten his key and hopes you are home. We work the East Trench until the sun lifts enough to make us curse, or put hats on tight enough to leave lines. The wind brings a smell like old penny and cold iron from the creek, mixed with the warm plastic of tarps. A jet draws a line so thin you can pretend it is a tear in the blue if you are dramatic, or a man who likes to explain everything with math if you're not. We mark our little triumphs with flags that run chalky fingers against our pants when we pass. At noon, we climb down because the rules say stop before sun makes us bad at caring. The field lab lives in 2 linked trailers that sit like brothers who want to admit they are family. There is a ramp because someone thought of knees. There is a handrail because someone else thought of falling. Inside, fluorescent lights buzz and then settle into a note you only hear if you stop holding boxes. The air is cooler than outside and smells like ethanol, stale coffee, and the duct tape we use more than we ought. The mini fridge has a gasket that burps a sigh if you open it on the right angle. The compressor clicks on if you breathe wrong. I store yogurt behind a jar of consolidant so no one with new eyes mistakes it and dies of being too embarrassed to read a label. On the far bench, bathed in that humming light, the catalog scanner blinks its small red grid. It's an old one, the kind that beeps in a voice like someone pushing a swing, and it has learned our inventory numbers the way a dog learns your footfalls. When it reads, it likes to read from left, down, then back up, a habit, a comfort. Today it reads in a different sweep. It goes slow, then fast, then slow again, 3 shorts and a long, and the sound lines up with something at the base of my skull that makes my tongue think of electricity. "You good?" someone asks, and I say yes because there is food in my mouth, and that makes yes the only honest word you can say. We log the day's small items, triangular pieces that belong to ribs, a pebble-sized tooth from a fish that never came up for air, a fragment of a jaw that will tell someone with more degrees than any person should want about diet and season and flood. The scanner likes to beep as if ordering its own heartbeat. It gives me a name to coil myself around that is not the one I carry. The trailer AC rattles in fits. Someone hits it with the heel of a hand and it remembers itself. The fan over the sink turns in a way that makes the chain pull tap the shade every so many seconds, a metronome for men who don't practice. At the notice board by the door, there is a new sheet printed off the county server at dawn. It says, the High Plains Advisory is extended through the week, which means no open flames, not even near the creek, and a courtesy call if we plan anything with a generator. We cook on camp stoves with the turning heads adjusted low enough to make everyone cross, and we eat a lot of cold things, and we pretend we like it. The advisory is written in the county tone, both helpful and disappointed, like your aunt who smiles while taking the keys. Below it is a smaller sheet, this one on lab letterhead from the university that says, due to an unspecified incident, field teams are to refrain from individual exploration, report anomalies to supervisors, and keep daily logs current. The word unspecified sits on that page like a child that won't leave the kitchen. Someone underlined report in blue pen, decent round letters. Someone else wrote in pencil beside it, unless it wants report. No one has owned that pencil yet. We have a ritual in camp in late afternoon if the wind doesn't grab us. We sit at the 2 picnic tables under the one tree with leaves that look like they might have been paper. Once we eat things with lids, we tell polite lies about what we plan to find in the morning, as if planning ever mattered in dirt. We drink hose water that tastes like a warehouse until your tongue stops complaining. The sound of the highway never bothers to thin this time of day. We take it as part rhythm, part threat. You work near a road, and it runs your day on the edges whether you put your ear to it or not. Tonight, the sky to the north goes the color of raw meat for a minute and then corrects to something you can call pretty without lying. There's heat lightning far enough away we have time to be smug. Someone makes a joke about the grant renewal and how the writer online wants more public engagement, and can we please stage a find if no one minds. We don't stage anything. We stage our faces sometimes for donors, but you can only fake that so long before the dirt tells people what it is and what it isn't. It isn't generous, It isn't out to hurt you either. It is more like a dog you didn't train who sleeps at your feet because your feet are there and warm and not because you're owed. I wash my cup and turn it upside down on the table so the dust won't find it, and it makes a ring I wipe with the dry part of a towel. The towel smells like water that has been through too many hands and one bottle of detergent poured by a person who doesn't believe in measuring. When the camp generator kicks from a cough into a steady, the fluorescents inside draw a small crowd of moths that die without ceremony. I flick the switch off over the sink because I can and leave the other on because somebody always feels safer with one. Sleep is in a tent, far enough from the trailers for the illusion of privacy and near enough that I can pretend I will hear if anything decides to go wrong with the lab overnight. I count wrongs as a lullaby. A breaker tripping because the AC throws a tantrum. A raccoon dragging something that clinks. A person who didn't get what they came for and decides to earn it from someone else. Schooler. The tarp over my tent roof taps out a long story about wind and doesn't read ahead for spoilers. I lie with my hands crossed over my chest like a cartoon because if I sprawl, I wake with my shoulder angry. The hills breathe out and then in, and the canvas cabin next over coughs in a dream. When the voice comes, it does not come from outside. It sits in the space inside the tent where your own breath sometimes feels too big. Hold still, it says again, a cousin of the one that made me a statue in the trench. My hands choose stillness before words can. The lamp against my sternum, looped to its habit, warms my skin through the shirt. The battery indicator in the dark makes an honest, faint pulse, then steadies to a line. Hold still, the voice says, because it has nothing more complex to ask, and maybe that is the whole point of any of this. Hold still. Be one thing until the rest of the room catches up. I sleep enough to lie about it in the morning. The Camp S little fridge clicks its compressor on with a noise like a coin hitting a sink, and then off, and then on again because it doesn't trust itself. The sky shows off the part of blue it keeps for us to think we're lucky. I walk to the trench with coffee that tastes like a dare and a granola bar that tastes like mulch you can live on, if you aren't too fussy. I peel back the shade cloth from where the flashlight that had my nick sat one life ago. Nothing new, which is what you want if you want to lie about control. I run the brush in circles, soft, and smell the damp that wasn't there yesterday, and the old iron that is always there. I let my wrist find the rhythm it likes, a count that steadies the stupid parts of myself. I say into the trench, okay, if it's a joke, it's a good one. If it's not, I am still me. Dirt would shrug if it had shoulders. I work. That is what my hands do when my head wants to fuss. Long before noon, I open up a sweep of ribs that belong to something that took breathing seriously. They arc like a hand holding a fruit that hasn't been invented yet. My water bottle has that dust line you get when you let it sit, and the wind does what it wants with your day. When I go down for logs and labels, the lab is not just cooler. It has a sound I don't know how to put in the book. The fluorescents buzz, but their note has a harmony under it I haven't heard before, a second tone in my teeth. The inventory scanner sits where it sits, red eye asleep. When I wake it and run it over the tag on the rib tray, it gives me the 3 short, 1 long. I expect then a new soft chirp, the kind you get from a smoke detector when it thinks about telling you its battery is now more memory than power. The printer gives me a label, sticky, and the letters on it are darker than yesterday, as if the ink has decided to believe in itself. On the far wall, the notice about the advisory has a corner that wants to curl, and next to it someone has put a new sheet up without signature or seal. It says, when you find yourself, record. I pick at the Scotch tape edge because nobody tucked it under like I do. The tape has heat behind it from the plastic, not from anything dramatic. The word yourself holds the eye and doesn't apologize. I pretend I didn't see it because pretending is how we keep order when order wants to go barefoot. In the afternoon, the county pushes the advisory into something with teeth. An email in that tone again, but add a line. All field work must pause at dusk. Returning to town after dark is discouraged. Refrain from solitary walks. The phrase "pause at dusk" makes us laugh at the picnic table, like teenagers who don't like being told what to do when the thing they were told not to do already stopped being fun. The line about solitary walks makes two of the grad students look down at their boots and then pass their boots at the dust pattern nobody else noticed they were making. The road down the hill into town has two lights, if you can call them that. One at the four-way, where trucks roll slow enough to admit they re-scared, and one at the edge of the main drag that goes yellow, flashing nights because no one here wants to wait if they don't have to. Those lights have a pattern I've learned unconsciously. I got it wrong last night, and I sat under yellow farther than my patience has ever held. The advisory uses words like refrain because they play nice in court. What it means is, please don't ease. We wash what we can without running afoul of the "don't waste water" note tapped to the sink. Hose water runs with a cough at first, then a steady thin rope. I fill the big pot to soak the brushes, and the hose knocks once, twice in the wall, which is what it always does when there's air in the line. But the knocks line up with a little pulse in my own mouth, and I catch myself touching my lips as if to quiet a word I didn't mean to say. "Hold still," I tell the hose. It doesn't, which is good. I worry when things listen. As the sun slides, a woman from the permit office comes up in a truck with a door that knows exactly where the dent wants to be. She steps out like she wishes her boots were someone else's. She has a clipboard that hangs crooked and a pen she keeps clicking because she doesn't like what she is going to say. We stand together by the flag ropes where the ribs lie. She clears her throat once, then again because the first try didn't satisfy her. "We're doing a 36 hours pause," she says. "Review of procedures. There's a line in the new guidance about..." She waves the pen at the trailer where the new sheet sits like a dare. "About record keeping." "We love record keeping," I say, and smile the way you smile to tell someone you want tea fight, and you will hold a grudge without making a thing of it. She looks past me into the trench, not at the ribs, which I respect, but at the shade cloth and the stakes and the shovel someone left in a way that made it a hazard. "Bring it all in for tonight," she says. "No tarps, no tools left out. A storm's supposed to go near us, or a storm-shaped lie that keeps men like me from looking stupid tomorrow. Either way, don't." We break faster than we like. The crew packs with more hands than parts to hold, and the benches in the lab look uglier when they're covered in everything at once. The scanner mouth beeps itself into a corner where a box rubs its red eye. The printer curls labels like a bored boy snaps gum. The compressor on the fridge clicks and clicks and clicks and doesn't catch, then does, a little unsteady, like a man taking the stairs after a shot at lunch. I run a damp towel over my face and smell dust and metal in my own neck in a way that isn't flattering. Before I shut the lab for dark, I switch off the fluorescence, and the room goes to a shade that makes my hands look like other people's. In that shadow, the little red light on the scanner writes itself as a line for a second, and then becomes a dot again, which is probably a nothing and feels like a warning, and I pick both up in my pocket and take them back to the tent with me. In my tent, I put the lamp on my chest again, like a habit I deny. The canvas whispers with a breeze I claimed I wanted all afternoon and do not want now. The zipper clasp on my jacket bumps the cot frame every so many seconds and makes a tick that convinces itself it is rhythm. Somewhere outside, a generator 2 hills over coughs and then stops, and the quiet that follows feels like bad news, though it is just a machine reminding us it is not a river. I count the seconds between fridge clicks. I stop because counting makes them bolder. I dream in a way I distrust. The trench is long, and the sky over it kneels low like a person listening. My hands are clean in the way people describe infants. In the mudstone where the flashlight was is a mark like a whirl, then like a map, then like letters, if letters were water. I press my thumb to it and the rock warms and gives not like clay, not like flesh, but in a way I can only call patient. In the dream, the voice says, "Hold still," not as a command, but as a diagnosis. In the dream, I know that the word record does not mean write down. It means what a record used to mean before playlists turned to fog, a groove made by a needle in something that learned the needle and kept it. Dawn brings a sky with a stomach. We are not blessed, and we are not punished. We eat from lids, we pack in what we left, we touch everything like we meant to leave it where it is and chose otherwise. I take the long way into town to satisfy the ordinance that pretends to care which road my tires make dirty. The main drag has that over-familiar look small towns get when they want to be photographed, and nobody with a camera has gas money. Traffic lights do their program, green to yellow to red, each with its patient breath. When I hit the first, I hit it wrong and sit under red with my blinker clicking at a speed my pulse decides to respect. When it goes, I go. At the second light, a school bus noses through from the left with its big mouth set against anything that would argue. The children bob in their seats like corn in a pot. A girl in the close window holds up a paper with a word colored thick enough to leave wax on the back of the sheet, and the word is mine. I look away as if eye contact could make me honest 1 minute sooner than I can manage. At the motel, because the university housing never materialized and the rented house fell through and the one sublet with a bed frame you could trust went to someone who said please better than I did, I let myself in and set the cup from the lobby under the tap in the little bathroom that smells like clinging old bleach and the damp that never learned to move out. Hose water from a motel faucet tastes like every room that shared that line and didn't bother to hide it. I drink anyway because hydrating is a kind of religion in jobs like mine, and I'm good at devotion when it is measurable. The air unit under the window breathes in and breathes out with a conviction I envy. The little fridge complains in its particular key when I open it, and when it hums tuned to something in my jaw that makes my teeth itch in the way they did yesterday. On the way back up the hill, I stop at the permit office because a person needs to show face to keep what a person needs. The fluorescent in the hallway outside the cubicles hums in a different note than the labs. Tara is not here. There is a man with hair that makes him look like he sleeps in the back room, who hands me a printed copy of the pause order and a reassuring smile that is for himself. He says the phrase out of an abundance of caution, and then he says, "You folks are good at rolling with, right?" I say yes. There is nothing else that keeps the conversation from learning your fear. Back on the ridge, the wind herd has moved on to some other pasture. The tarps lie low, bored. The trailer yawns when I open it because it believes it is a mouth, and because I did not let the air bleed the night like I should have. I switch on the fluorescents and their flicker writes its old story. The scanner blinks its one red eye as if waking from a nap. I lean to the notice board. Someone has put a second sheet up, same plain paper, same untidy tape. It says, "Put it where it belongs." I don't know if the someone is the someone who wrote the first one, and I do not ask down the long linked room where men and women pretend not to read over each other. Shoulders. I know who it is if I don't use names and I don't tell. The sheet sits beside the county advisory like family you pretend not to claim until someone else says something unkind, and then you say, well. I reach under the bench and pull out my field box, the one with the missing sliding latch I keep fixing with a rubber band, because it's faster to solve the symptom than inventory the cause. Inside is the stub of a pencil I like, because it fits under my thumb just so, and a set of little bags with zips that stick if you approach them wrong, and tags with wire eyelets, and a washer I took from the bottom of the truck a week ago without meaning to, because it glinted and because my pocket is a crow. I set the washer on the bench, and then I set it on the pegboard outline that matches it, a white circle drawn in grease pencil 10 months ago by a man who has now gone to a different life with less dust and more meetings. And I watch the washer sit in its shape and decide whether it is now true. It is. At noon, the sky tries on a dark that may just be cloud, and may be the kind of reasoning the valley does before it teaches you to stay low. Lunch tastes like someone else's crackers. The wind steals napkins only to drop them just out of reach and make a person undecent. I watch the East Trench from the edge of camp. The surface that yesterday kept my hand is blank. The ribs under shade cloth have a dignity I want to ascribe to bone and know belongs to gravity and the sun. The hills in the distance pull heat like a blanket you're not done with. I take my lamp out. I press it to my palm. It warms like a habit. I tilt it so the beam catches what isn't there. In the bright, I have a thought I do not like. The groove is already cut, and I am the stylus that forgot its own song. The pause lasts into the next day, and then another, and men get short. The permit truck sits by the gate and makes people glance at their papers and then show them as if we practice virtue by having nothing to hide. Someone posts on the town page about figures walking the ridge at night, lights low, moving in a line not like hikers and not like miners either. Something in between, a weird slow procession too honest to be a prank. Someone else says there were no footprints in the morning and calls the first someone a name that isn't T-fair. The grocery puts out a small sign that says, "If there is to be a run on anything, please let it be common sense." It is the kind of joke that works until the world doesn't to laugh, and then the joke hurts. The third day of the pause, I go up to the trench alone within the fence line, because that counts as not walking solitary if you are creative. I roll back the shade cloth, and the bed makes its old faces. I kneel and touch the pocket where the flashlight memory lived. The rock is cool and honest. When I touch the pocket, my own thumbprint climbs to meet me, not in the stone this time, but in my skin, a bloom of heat that remembers whirl and scar and carries it to my elbow. I sit back on my heels like a priest who believed and got a proof he didn't ask for. My lamp on the mat beside me flickers on without my thumb, and then off, a polite cough. The wind stops. It is that fast. It has a signature when it quits like that, a sound like a freight 2 counties away that doesn't get louder or soft, just stops thinking about you. The tarp edges fall, and the flies that had made a game of my ears land on the mat and clean their small hands as if washing up for something mean. The beam from the lamp crawls into the pocket as if the pocket is now less rock and more throat. Something in the soil under my knees shifts enough to convince my kneecaps of age. I lay my palm over the pocket, and it lifts a degree into my hand the way bread does when you leave it too long in a bowl, a warm dome under your palm that shouldn't be the business of dirt. I don't press. I don't pull away. I hold. It is a bad verb for science and a good one for every other thing. The voice does not say hold still. The voice does not come. The breath in the trench seems to come from below, as if the hill inhaled, and I have put my hand over its mouth. Down the slope, the trailer door, imperfectly latched, opens and closes once with an apology. In the shadow inside the pocket, the shape of my lamp is-head writes itself into ridges that call themselves lines and then letters. Not letters, I know, letters with too many corners and not enough coil. I watch a stroke thicken and then thin and then thicken away like the edge of a stream under heat. I do not call for anyone, not because I am greedy and not because I am calm, because saying a name would make this a thing that can be told, and I know enough to know I do not know enough yet to let it be turned into a paper, in a journal someone will not read and still cite. My palm sweats, and the sweat dries, and I smell the dry, and it is not mine. When the wind returns, it brings the smell of wet pennies and a taste like the air in a basement after rain has visited all the old boxes. The pocket is nothing again. My lamp cools against my thigh where I set it when my hand remembered what else it should belong to. I stand. The blood in my head has a sound to it like gravel on thin steel. I cover the area and walk down to the lab without looking left or right, in case looking tells someone else what I am. In the lab, the fluorescent lights buzz, and then agree on a note that is kinder than yesterday's harmonic. The scanner sits as it sits. The notice board holds both sheets and now a third. Someone has stuck it there with a strip of gaffer's tape, and the torn edge looks like teeth. It says, "Bring it in." I take my field box from under the bench. I put inside it the lamp, not because it belongs there, but because the sentence asked me to perform an action, and I am good at following until I am not. I add my notebook, the small one with the entries I keep for myself and not the distribution list, the catalogue of minor failures I excuse in the right tone on bad days. I add a roll of labels older than is wise because they stick just enough to feel like hope. I add one glove. The other is at home, at the motel, by the sink, flopped open like an animal on a rug. I set the box on the bench beside the pegboard and say, because there is nobody I trust more than objects when rooms get too loud. Where is the rest? The scanner wakes and beeps 3 shorts, and then a long, and I think maybe I am ridiculous, and then it beeps a second long, a sound like a machine thinking about kindness. Outside, the generator rises into its own song. The fridge clicks, catches. The little AC clatters and falls into step. The fluorescent hums. The trailer S door expands in the heat and drags at the jam like a man with too much pride and the wrong shoes. The valley breathes and returns what I rented from it when I asked to listen. I know where the rest is. I knew the second I put the lamp on my chest last night and the word record walked through the tent skin. The rest is in the hill, the way a groove is in a record before it is played. The rest is in the water tower in town, the way names are in the surface tension waiting for whether to decide to spell them. The rest is in the cold aisle of the grocery where the barcode beeps learn patterns, because beeps want company. The rest is in the hose that knocks twice, because you did not bleed it, and the air wants out of its line. The rest is quietly everywhere. The box in front of me is only a practice. When the county lifts the paws at dusk with a note you could call magnanimous if magnanimous wore high-visibility vests, we go back out like men who think their bodies can be read by what they work. We put tarps back where tarps belong. We lay out brushes and rolls, and someone as grandmother as chipped bowl that has seen more ancient dirt than that woman who kept it best would have tolerated. We fix a line of stakes a few inches left, because yesterday they were wrong, and today they should be another wrong instead. And I kneel at the pocket where the rock took my hand, and I put my palm flat, and I hold as if I can convince the hillside that I understand what being still means. I do not, but I can lie to both of us until one of us believes it. At twilight, the heat backs off enough that men think about food without hating their own mouths for needing. We go down to camp. The generator starts easy and then stops because the fuel line has learned a new way to kink. Someone taps it and does not swear because someone else is recording. Power returns. Fluorescents give the moths something to live for. The inventory scanner finds the label I set down on the wrong bench and reads it without being asked. It beeps a pattern it hasn't used before. 3 short, 2 long, a soft little chirp, as if it tried to mimic the call of a bird this valley hasn't heard in years and forgot the end. We look at one another like men who know a joke is being told somewhere and hope it is kind. That night at the motel, the air unit breathes in and out like a man learning to nap. My cup on the counter leaves a ring the towel doesn't accept. The little fridge clicks on and the hum finds the thing in my jaw that belongs to the tower in town, the one I climb when I'm bored, as if tinnitus were an address that could be shared. I put my lamp on my chest and tap the button and wait for it to write me a better person in my own bones. When I close my eyes, the after image of the beam makes a faint tunnel. In it are letters I don't share and a voice that says nothing. I sleep in the way you sleep on a couch, in a stranger S house, when you know where the bathroom is by faith and not map. At dawn, before the heat straps everything down, I go up and kneel and put my hand on the pocket and say, because words have been asked for, I will bring the rest. I can't promise what that is, but I can bring. The rock under my palm warms, a small polite degree, and settles. The shadecloth flutters once, then accepts its lot. The creek below sends up a smell like old copper and new penny, and I think of blood and pretend I did not. The scanner in the lab beeps without being touched, a sound carrying on still air like a rumor you can verify if you're not afraid. The town's one stoplight cycles in the distance through its practice. Somewhere a hose knocks twice, then once, then decides it has said enough. The hillside says nothing a person could record on a tag. It says what it says to ribs when bone becomes map. It says, stay. It says, be where you are and put things in their outline. It says, you found your hand. Put it where it belongs. The valley took our pause like a suggestion and then did what it wanted. By late morning, the wind drew itself thin and laid down, the tarps went still, and the creek made a noise like you get from rubbing your finger along the rim of a glass and wanting no one to know. The plaster on yesterday, ribs, dried with that chalky skin that turns to dust if you look at it while thinking of anything else. I eased my palm over the pocket and felt the day arrive inside my hand before it made it to my face. We kept the county's rule, even when it read like it had teeth. No tarps left overnight, no tools out, logs current and stored in triplicate like you could scare chaos by making more paper. The university sent another email in that strained collegial tone that works on chairs and not on men with dirt in their ears. Refrain from independent excavation. All finds must be verified by a second party. Anomalies to be escalated. Escalated is a word people use when they don't want to admit the stairs only ever go down. I signed the acknowledgement and added a line in my pocketbook that said, second party equals me tomorrow. The permit man came again, not Tara. He stood with his thumbs tucked into the safety vest and looked at our shadecloth like it was a kind of sin he could forgive if we would only say it with the right mouth. You got an end date, he said, and I said the only honest thing. All the good layers end when they want. He wrote nothing down. He let his pen sit against the clipboard long enough to make a small dark dot that looked like a fly from where I stood. He asked if we'd had any trespass in the night. I shook my head. It wasn't trespass I worried about anymore. It was inheritance. The new notice on the lab board grew companions like a family photo that forgets who is related to whom. Put it where it belongs. Bring it in. Record. Someone added in small pencil, if it doesn't belong, make a place. Under that, someone else, neat block print. Do not do this alone. The scanner chirped its own agreement when I glanced at it as if attention woke it. The printer coughed out a test strip and kept it in its mouth like a child who will not give up a coin. The little fridge hummed and then sighed and then took a breath like a careful singer. I've loved less honest things. I started making places, not with ceremony. The world doesn't trust big gestures. I chalked outlines on the pegboard where they'd worn away. I drew thin white circles inside the cupboard where lids should nest and never do. I took the lids and nested them anyway. I wiped the counter in squares and put the square bottle where the square stain remembered it. I laid the older tags at the back where older tags decide they belong. And the newer ones clipped forward where hands go first, because impatience is not a sin here, it is a resource. I slipped the washer I had returned yesterday back out and held it like a coin, then put it again in its outline and felt the room correct to accommodate this little loyalty. In the motel, the air unit breathed in its practiced way, and the small freezer box gave up its ghost slowly, frosting only the back left corner like it refused to commit. I left the lamp on the dresser facing the wall to make a circle of light I could pretend was someone else's, yes, because sometimes my own company has a smell I would rather not name. The towel rack clinked against its bracket because a screw had decided rust was a better family than talk. I could have tightened it. I left it. A person must let at least one thing misbehave so the rest will accept their lines. I called my sister the second night of the pause because the word yourself on the notice scratched a part of my head I don't share. She lives 2 ridges over, one town inland that gets the carnival lights even when the fair isn't on. She asked me if I was eating, which is how we say I love you when we don't like wasting the good words. I told her I was fine. I told her about the ribs in a way that made them smaller. I did not tell her about the pocket or my palm, or the lamp going on when I hadn't depressed. She said our mother would have loved to hear I was putting things where they belong, as if belongings were the one ritual that makes a family decent. I said I remembered the drawers, and she laughed because you had to live with our mother's drawers to know. When she hung up, she said my name in a way that made me feel put away in a box lined with tissue. I slept with my hand under my cheek and woke with the skin smelling like stone. On the 4th day after the first morning the flashlight nested where the bone should have been, the county lifted the pause. We rolled the shade cloth back and the bed looked unchanged. It was not. A camera can tell you this if you trust pixels. The color of the mud shifted half a shade toward what my mouth calls iron. The rib edges felt more sure under the brush, as if my hand had improved in sleep. The little pocket where nothing sat had the memory of being full the way a chair knows a person by the time it starts to sag. The hillside paints its own palimpsest. You can sand that down if you enjoy pretending. I tried an experiment I wouldn't put in the lab book. I took my lamp and my field knife and a tag, and I walked out of sightline under the lip of the trench where the earth keeps its temperature even. I leaned the lamp against the wall and turned it face on, a small sun for this little weather. I set the knife S handle in the beam and watched the light come back along the blade and die without incident. I added the tag and the paper looked more confident in that light, a secret it wanted to own. Then I set my left hand in the beam, palm open. The lamp warmed and the print swam, and I saw the whirl right itself in the stone grain, as if the rock liked to take a rubbing of anything willing. I turned my hand over, and the other side wrote too, less exact, more concerned with bone than skin. I did not force anything. The beam went a little green for a heartbeat like old exit signs. Then it went pale again, and the groove, if that is what it is, lay there under my hand, polite as a seat at a table no one calls yours until you claim it. Stop, I told myself, and I did, and I hated the way my hand wanted to go on without me. The town had its own version of our notices. The grocery taped a sheet inside the first door. No exchanges without receipt. Under it, in the same careful font, if you borrowed it, please unborrow. The clerk apologized to me while she rang up hand wipes and hose gaskets, and she never apologized to me for anything before. The traffic light at the center of Maine cycled in a pattern I have known since I learned a clutch. And then, one evening, it held green longer than it should, and the cross street muttered, and the drivers looked at the little colored circle like an old friend who has learned a new joke you are not sure you like. The power company sent a text about a rolling outage that might or might not include us, and the words in the text made the same shape as the hum of the lab and the fridge and the tower if you squinted. The water tower out past the sawmill held its posture like it always does. I wanted to climb it. I did not. Did. That is growth people get credit for in meetings. The site foreman, a man who would have made a good nurse because he can lay hands without making you feel owned, started carrying the radio, always left hip volume low, that twitch in the thumb that means ready to break silence if silence tries to become a rule. He came to the trench and squatted and watched my brush move and didn't talk. When he did, he only said, "Anything weird? Write it down," which is what passes for profound when you have lived under tents more than roofs. I said I would. I wrote a line later that read, "Every weird thing is only a regular thing with less time on it." I dreamt again, and I would have gladly traded a rib to someone for a different kind of dream. I was in the lab. The fluorescents were off. The red eye of the scanner made a single line that drifted backward and forward like a man deciding between two stations, and then beneath that a pale tunnel thrummed, the kind my lamp finds. In the tunnel I saw labels, not words, just the idea of labels. White rectangles with a confidence that suggested glue. Each label had nothing written on it, and I understood that was the right content. I woke with the taste of lithified mud at the back of my tongue, a clean taste if you grew up where the well ran through stone. When the storm came, it came from east across the flats, a grey wall with the kind of belly you get from a farm dog fed scraps and good intentions. We stowed everything like we had never not loved tidy. We rolled tarps into tubes and cinched them. We cleaned brushes to a squeak that made teeth spit. We stacked trays and covered them in plastic, and covered the plastic in the tarp tubes like rain might be fooled by layers. The first drops made a sound on the shade cloth that scratched a memory under my scalp. The rain arrived as a long apology. In the lab, the fluorescents hated it. They buzzed high at the edge of hearing and then dropped to something too friendly to trust. We waited. The water ran off the hill in the paths we knew it would, and then it made a new path near the east trench, a narrow one that took a line under the shade cloth and turned left as if it had been told there was a thing it ought to see. I pulled the cloth back. The pocket filled and then drained, and then filled and then held. In the little surface mirrored there, I saw the ribs as if from under, seeing sky through bone, which is a point of view none of us owe. The lamp on the mat bumped my knee without wind. I picked it up and set it aside because I was embarrassed for us both. When the rain quit, it did not quit by half. It clapped itself clean and went. The dirt drank until it pretended to be satisfied. The foreman gave us that chin move that says eat and don't lie about being hungry. I went to the lab to rinse grit out of the basin that never forgets what you do to it. The scanner blinked into a pattern that looked like a pulse on a hospital screen, and then gave itself up again to being a dot. A new sheet had landed on the board, while the rain told the valley what it remembered. Gaffer tape torn like teeth, the edge not lined. Different hand, rounder letters. It said, "We ask for the rest." No signature, no crest, no explanation, all caps. The little scream that pretends to be official. Under it, in pencil, a person's impatient truth. What if the rest is us? Someone had started to erase that, and then stopped, because the graphite smeared and it looked worse to rub honesty than to leave it. I took my field box and put inside the odd things I carried close, because a pocket without purpose gets dangerous. The coin I had rubbed smooth with my thumb on a winter day when the wind made my face small. The ring of a lid from a jar I couldn't open without a clamp. The rubber foot from the end of a stool one of the students broke and forgot to confess. The tiny washer yet again, because I'm honest enough to know I'm not to be trusted. The lamp I left on the bench, face down. I told no one I was going to town. It wasn't against any brief. We weren't being watched like that. It was the kind of leaving you do when you want to pretend you might be missed, and you also want not to owe anyone that missing. The truck made its familiar complaint on the grade. The radio went to static, where the line of hill cuts the valley's sense of itself. When I hit the first light, it held red and then red, plus a little, and I let my right hand rest open on the wheel and counted in words because numbers are not welcome here. When the light gave me permission, I did not go for half a sentence. In that half, I realized the town had learned a new pitch. Every fridge, every transformer, every compressor and motor that could hum found a note that matched a low beat only my jaw knew. The tower at the far edge of town sang in a voice I needed. I parked by the tower fence because the town had put a chain across the base road with a something hours sign I didn't read. The gate lock clicked with a tone from a place I wouldn't assign to metal. The ladder kissed my glove. The cage rattled like a good story you've heard. I clipped in and climbed. Halfway up, my palm warmed the way the rock warms it. At the hatch, I waited a breath, because the place where you put your head into a dark space that doesn't owe you anything deserves a moment. The hatch hinge argued and then accepted, and the smell came up. That cold iron and old coins and distant rain, and I wanted to drop the washer and watch it make rings. I kept my hand. The catwalk flexed just enough to keep me honest. I took the brass key the town uses to open hose bibs from my pocket and laid it on the hatch because a man should carry a key when he climbs a thing that promises water. The key did what it did last time I did this dance. It wanted to stay where it lay, a light cling to steel that felt like a habit. I slid it to the edge, and it resisted, and then agreed with a little hesitation that made it companionable. I lay on my stomach and looked down into the water, the small, round sky it keeps for itself. It did not make sentences. It moved like patience does. Just enough to be sure it's there. Then when the wind at my back lifted as if remembering its mouth, the ripples crossed and the surface took on strokes that are not water's normal business. Names wrote themselves again, and this time I recognized too many. First names only. Plain. The barista whose neck tattoos my supervisor resents without admitting it. The librarian who puts the good returns on the cart if you are polite. The boy who ran track and never got a medal and still shows up at the field at dawn anyway. My name did not come, and I felt the sort of gratitude you do when a thing you want and fear chooses to leave you standing. The names thinned and numbers came. Not addressed numbers, not counts, numbers that are not allowed here unless spelled. In words, they would have been heavy words, too big for the space. They became curves instead, and then the water gave itself back to being water, which is all it was for before we asked it to entertain us. I set the washer on the hatch and pushed it. It clung, then took the slope and fell, a small sound against the rim, a softer sound after, not a plink, more like a sigh. Concentric circles walked away from where it met the surface, and in the walking, they wrote. Not letters, outlines. It took me an embarrassed breath to understand what shape I was seeing. The rings nested like draw circles. They formed the outline of a hand, then another, then the little gap where a scar lives, then nothing. I closed the hatch. The key wanted to stay. I let it. I climbed down with my chest as careful as a man steps around someone sleeping. The town breathed that low tone again, and the light at the base of Main clicked longer yellow for me in a small mercy. When I returned to camp, the light in the lab had learned a new stutter. The scanner would not settle its red dot. It drew a single line across its own mouth and then put the dot back, and I wanted to apologize to it for making it perform. The notices on the board had shifted as if the trailer were a boat. The corners curled in the same direction. Someone had added one more sheet, tape in the top two corners only, like the bottom might want to run. It said, "Yourself is an object." There is a kind of philosophy that smells like corkboard. I hate it. I stood with my hand on the bench until my palm warmed wood, and wood warmed me back. The generator coughed, then steadied. Someone's jacket sleeve brushed the door and made that vinyl whisper that makes every person look up. I did what a person with a small use does when bigger words try to be brave. I put things where they belonged. My lamp went into my box. The wrinkled labels went into the bin for winked-out glue. The notes I write myself slipped under the blotter because that is the only place in any room that feels like a throat with a promise. When I went to the trench, I folded the shade cloth like it was a flag, corners first, edges lined up, because people are watching even when they don't know why. I steadied my breath. I opened the pocket with a brush I had cut shorter to be meaner. The mud showed its grain the way a shaved head shows scars. I set my palm and felt the place meet it. It didn't keep me. I would have liked it if it had. In the quiet before dusk, when the air listens as if it remembers how, the voice came again, not breath against my ear, and not in the tent but around my head like a hat that fit. Hold still, it said, not to make me stop, to make me become. I kept my hand where it was. My mouth kept its edge shut. The way you keep your mouth closed before water, before a plunge, before a word that costs too much. There are moments in this kind of work when you can almost watch the past harden under your hand. It is a mean sensation and a merciful one. The hillside is not telling you a story. It is telling you it is. Audience is a human invention. I watch the layer know me, the way a chair knows the person who has used it, the way a wrench comes to think your grip is the correct one. The pocket took the warmth and gave back a steadier beat than mine. The beam blinked in the corner of my sight, though the lamp lay shut away. The scanner chirped in the lab, 3 short, 1 long, the exact old tune. I counted. I counted in words. I did not move. After, the foreman called us in because the county new letter wanted people back behind fencing before night found us. We rinsed brushes, we stacked. We set our cups upside down like we were suspicious of the air. The moths at the trailer light battered their lives away without getting anything for it. The printer spit a label out and it stuck half to itself, and a student peeled it free. Slow, like the thing that might break was his. The AC clicked on. The compressor hummed. The fridge knocked twice and then held. The hose banged in someone's walled-down valley, and the sound came uphill like a promise. We ate. We lied about hours of sleep we had not earned and would not. We said a man's laugh is carrying better tonight, as if sound had learned manners. I walked back to the trench because habit runs a person when rules only wish they did. The shade cloth in the last light had the color of old money. I lifted a corner, then the other corner, then the next. The ribs knew me. The little pocket where the beam finds a tunnel held a smoothness that wasn't there when the rain left. I set my palm and the print met it. Not identical, not a mirror, a conversation. It made a tightness under my chest that I could call fear or call belonging depending on the face I wanted to save. I closed the cloth and went to the tent. I lay with the lamp on my chest but did not press. I counted the breaths before the world's little motors fell into their shared note, and I wondered if it was a kindness to call it shared. In the edge before sleep, the voice said, "Hold still one more time," and I gave it my hand again across the space, the way you give a hand to a person whose eyes are not looking at you because they are looking at a place in the room that matters more. I slept until the fridge clicked, and the click dragged me to a small, clean awake. In the morning, the county dropped the advisory to something with soft corners, a suggestion more than a rule, and the university's letter softened the words escalate and replaced them with consult. The notice board had lost a sheet. Bring it in was gone, or I could not find it under the other corners. Sometimes absence is the more polite presence. Someone had written in the blank space where a sheet had been, "Done." It looked like a lie, and like a sentence I could accept. The scanner sat still, good dog. The printer leaned to one side like it had been bumped in the night, and then changed its mind about being offended. I went to the trench. I opened the cloth. The pocket had hardened, not glossy, finished. I brushed in a circle because circles keep your wrist from lying about straight lines. A small thing showed at the edge where the pocket sat. Not a tooth, not a chip of quartz from a man's boot last summer, not bone, round, smooth, a ring like the lid of a jar, the same size as a washer I might have borrowed 3 times. I lifted it with the tweezer I carry, not trusting my hand. It wasn't metal, it was rock that had made a good case for itself as round. Through the loop it had letters, not ours, cuts that keyed to the groove. I set it in the tray and kept it like a man puts a fly in an envelope when he wants an expert to say the word, "You don't have." Under the ring, the pocket showed something else, a shallow, a place where a palm could live. 5 short branches, where the fingers make their argument. At the end of one of the branches, a small nick where a scar would sit if scars moved, with the hand that carries them. I set my palm, and it met. Not perfectly, I won't claim it, but close enough that my jaw remembered the Tower S song. when I wasn't tea on the ladder, and my teeth found my tongue and I bit it because I needed to feel where I ended and the hillside began. I cut the section. I called it a feature in the log, because everything is a feature until a person with a salary you can imagine says it is an artifact. I padded it like you would a sleeping child you don't get to hand back. I carried it into the lab. I put it on the scale, and the scale thought for a second and then made a decision. The number didn't come because numbers are a way to lose time in here. The printer gave me a label. It stuck itself properly. The scanner loved it. The red eye laid a clean little grid across what might be mine. The beep made a pattern ID never heard that sounded like a hand knocking once at the wrong door, and then deciding that was the right one after all. I put the section under the fluorescence and they buzzed less. I put it on the bench where I could reach it without anyone noticing me reaching for it. I wrote in my notebook in a hand that used to belong to a younger man, and I kept the words small: mudstone, palm-shaped depression, surface polish. I did not write the part where the groove found me and not the other way around. A person should keep one true thing for his own. The county man came to check our ropes, as if ropes save bone. He signed a paper with his whole name and a flourish that belongs in another century. He looked at the section and asked if we'd found a print. I said we had. He asked of who. I said of what held. He smiled because he thought I'd tried to make a line, and he liked men who try and fail. He wrote nothing down. I drove into town after dinner because the sky had that unpromised blue that makes you think you deserve a clean cup and a chair that knows how to behave. The main drag had learned a new silence under the cars, a pressed-down kind, like a choir told to sing under their breath. The light at the first intersection held green a shade too long, and I let it because sometimes what we call glitch is a mercy we don't deserve. I pulled into the motel and the clerk said good evening as if practice might yet make her kind. In my room, the towel rack clinked the way it does, and the small fridge clicked and found its hum, and under the hum, I heard the water in the tower make a long stroke in its steel bowl. When I lay down, I put the lamp on my chest one more night, not because I think it will write anything worth reading into me, but because weight on a chest is an old human cure for the parts of us that want to run. I slept like a responsible liar. In the morning I woke with dust on my teeth and the taste of old metal in my throat, and the sick wish that every object in the lab had a shaped outline I could put it inside to make the room behave. We got our last clear day on a Friday. Nobody was counting down to until an email put a name to it. The county rolled back the seed of the ordinance to something that felt like a suggestion you could frame as helpfulness. The university rep drove up in a sedan that took the ruts like a timid dog and told us to be ready for visitors next week. The press office had made a call. We smiled with all the mouths we had and stacked the uglier pieces in a corner that makes ugly look like inventory. The foreman tapped the radio and made sure the battery had learned humility. A student cried in the bathroom because a tray he had fallen in love with was not going to be his tray when the people with credentials bigger than their wrists came. I told him a tray doesn't keep a man. He did not believe that yet. I went to the trench to say a word to the place before men arrived who talked too long for photographs. The shade cloth came back like a curtain, forgiving a bad performance. The pocket lay quiet and honest. The ribs kept to their arc. I put my palm down, and the stone rose the smallest degree and held me the way you hold a bird that has decided not to die while you are watching it. I will put you where you belong, I said, and for the first time I believed them myself on the lab board. I am an object. My outline exists already. My hand is a groove that makes its own song if you let it. On the way down, I stopped at the lab to wash the grit off my wrists. The fluorescence made a sound I could have danced to if other men wouldn't laugh. The scanner blinked itself even and quiet. The printer sat like a proof. The notice board was blank, not cleared. Blank, the way a sky is not empty when it is a sky. It was a place to put. I wrote nothing. At dusk, the town's tower took on a color that belonged to no county map. The water inside held names I would not be offered anymore. The light at the edge of Maine stepped through its cycle with a patience I could borrow. The motel fridge clicked and kept, the towel rack clinked, the air moved, the hose in the wall banged twice and then once, and meant nothing more dramatic than air has opinions. The next morning, the press office would come with their careful shoes. They would want what people want when they climb a hill in their city clothes. Clarity, a new word for a place, a number they can feel smart holding. I would show them ribs and beds and trays, and the distance between most of our sentences and truth. I would hold nothing up that wasn't already holding itself. I brought the section with the palm to the bench where the films sit, because I knew the polite trick of staging without lying. I put the lamp on the shelf above and did not turn it on. I laid the labels out like days of the week. I put the washer back where washers belong because my pocket told me it was time. I shut the lab and the door made a sound like the end of a song. I stood outside and smelled dust and heat and the long sigh of the day. The handprint in the section cooled. Through the loop, the whirl made a pattern that could have belonged to anyone. I wanted mine. It wasn't. It was the valley's, which is the correct answer and not enough. I left the loop on the bench so the first camera could find it and turn it gold. I left the field box open. I left myself where I was. And that is the end they get, and the one I get. A pocket in a layer that learned my heat and kept it just long enough to remind me that objects have more patience than the rest of us. A town that hummed itself into one long chord and then pulled back into scattered notes with grace. A tower that holds water and names in equal disinterest. A lab that knows how to keep a room quiet without pretending to be kind. A handprint that is not mine and is and will be read by someone after me and called something by a word that will not care. I put it there. When I wash my cup at night and turn it upside down on the pressboard counter in the motel, it leaves a ring the towel can chase and never catch. I leave the ring for morning. The fridge clicks and finds the hum. I count the seconds to it in words. I count them again, closer. I put my hand over my own mouth to keep the room from learning a name I haven't earned. The last morning before the visitors, I go up alone. The shade cloth lifts. The pocket is stone, the way stone pretends to be obvious. I press my palm flat and I hold and I am held, and nothing moves and everything moves, and the sound under the earth lines up with the sound in my jaw, and the world we work on accepts me as if my outline were chalked here long before my boots found the ladder. Then I lift my hand and I refuse to look for myself because a better man than me taught me once that looking for yourself in old things is how you miss them. I put the cloth down. I walk to the lab. I stand by the door. I put my hand on the bench. I wait for the scanner's little red eye to care. I wait for the compressor to click. I wait for the faucet to cough. I count the breaths before the hum returns, and I call that a life. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts or questions. I love hearing from you. Until next time, take care and stay awesome.